Good afternoon. Hey, welcome back to our fall Food for Thought program with the Frist Art Museum. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Gail Carr Williams from Vanderbilt University, and we are always so pleased to have this partnership with the Frist Art Museum. What a wonderful art museum we get to call ours here in Nashville, right? And it's led by the best, the most amazing director, Susan Edwards, who I know, Dr. Susan Edwards, who's someplace back there. And I'm always in awe of her bravery and her courage to bring us some of the most amazing art to Nashville. So, Susan, thank you for all you do for the Frist Art Museum, as well as what you do for Nashville. So thank you for letting us have this great partnership. But I'm not going to stand here and talk forever. I'm just so glad to be here, and I am going to turn this over to an amazing curator here at the Frist Art Museum, Katie Delmay. Katie, it's all yours. And again, thank you for coming.
Hey, well, thank you, Gail, and good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining us today for a really important conversation, I think, about the role of visual art in public spaces and its ability to really shape a community. The program is held in conjunction with the exhibition Murals of North Nashville Now, which is on view in our Conte Community Arts Gallery through January 5th. So we thought we would begin with a brief overview of the project and how it came into being. Then I will ask each of our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves and speak to how their work really intersects with this subject. We'll have a conversation among ourselves, and then hopefully there'll be time for us to take a few questions from you all. So the seed for this project was really planted several years ago when I was in my car and I heard a story on WPLN about an art student at TSU who was planning a wall fest to happen in North Nashville. He was featuring artists who were from the area and that were really addressing issues that impact the community in their work, and I thought that sounded very interesting. A year or so later, I found myself in North Nashville for previous Frist projects, and I saw some of those murals myself, and I was really impressed, and I noticed that unlike a lot of the other murals that we see popping up in our city almost every day, it seems, the murals here had really powerful social commentary, and that they really reflected the unique community in which the objects were placed. It's really a miracle I didn't get into a car accident as I was driving around seeing these great works of art. And I came to understand that part of the reason, in my mind, why these murals were so important and impactful is that they were actually made by artists who had strong ties to the neighborhood, rather than being made by outsiders or out-of-towners, which, if you do a little bit of digging, you'll find out that many of the very well-known and very Instagrammed murals in our city, especially down in the Gulch and in here downtown, are made by out-of-towners. So because the Frist mandate is to inspire people to look at their world, including their neighbors, in new ways through art, I became interested in organizing an exhibition that would, A, shine a light on some of these really talented and ambitious artists that were working right here, and but would also offer an opportunity to viewers to gain more awareness of this important part of our city. So the next step for me was getting to know Woke 3, who was the organizer of the Wall Fest, and other artists that are a part of the North Art Collective, a group that developed out of the Wall Fest. And actually, here are this is one mural. Unfortunately, it is no longer here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is one of the murals that was a part of the 2015 project. And here is another made by Alicia Boat-Mrozek, who happily is with us today. as well. So in addition to the North guys, I learned about other artists, including Elishaba, young artists that lived, worked, or had studied in North Nashville and that were making really important public art. So as this exhibition, as we were thinking about it, the question of, well, how do we bring public art that by its nature is outside of a museum or gallery setting? How do we bring it indoors? And we'll probably talk about that a little bit more later. But ultimately, we decided, after many conversations with this group of artists, that the Frist would commission 8 12 by 8 foot paintings made by the artists that you see on the screen now. And they would be designed to specifically fit within the bays of the gallery. It was important to us from the beginning to make sure that the works that are out in the community were a part of this project. So my colleague Megan Rust put together a wonderful map that you can press on. You can touch the different numbers and the works that live outside the museum. You can see them and learn more about who made them and where they are. So ultimately, our exhibition features 2 works by North, both of which feature the children that are represented in their mural Family Matters on Clarksville Pike. I hope you've had a chance to see it. If not, go check it out, and we'll see a slide of it in a minute. But these kids are maturing. They're growing up, and both the boy and the girl are rising above negative situations and making plans for a healthy future with education, community, and clean natural resources as necessary building blocks. Actually, I'll use the remote. Omari Booker is a TSU grad and a longtime worker at Woodcuts Gallery and Framing on Jefferson Street. And in his mural, he highlights the legacy of redlining, a policy you're probably familiar with that was a very discriminatory lending and investment policy that was promoted by both banks and the Federal Housing Administration for decades. He also is looking to gentrification and the resulting displacement that is being caused by the current construction boom. Photographer and graphic designer Lysander Bryant combines text and image in his work to create unabashed propaganda that's meant to re-brainwash viewers or transform their minds with a message like, "We want you," that elevates the value of Black lives. And in this case in particular, he's really wanting to bring awareness to the breadth of job opportunities for children of color. Former TSU art professor Brandon Donahue commemorates local victims of homicide in the year 2018, 85% of which were killed by guns, not surprisingly, in this memorial wall where he's airbrushed each of those individual names. Alicia Bromrosic, who I've mentioned, who is here with us today, she is a Memphis-born trained graphic designer who turned to tattooing 8 years ago and has a very successful practice on Jefferson Street. But of course, she's always maintained her studio practice. And in her mural, she's really focusing on the strength of women in particular as they navigate an environment that's filled with systemic inequities, whether it's our judicial system, as you can see with the dog and the balances, the incomplete histories, the pages of history literally being ripped out of the textbooks, and racially motivated violence that you can see in this family represented through this contemporary Pietà scene. Illustrator X Payne's mural depicts a young superhero who has been pushed out of his familiar environment and is now attempting to slay the dragon of greed. He has been coached and guided and given weapons by a stoic elder who is dressed as Batman. And finally, artists Courtney Adair Johnson, Marlos Avan, and Nuveen Barwari They work out of the Magruder Family Resource Center, and they partnered with youth from the Oasis Center and participants in the internship program Opportunity Now to create this mural that really reflects on the past, present, and future positions of Nashville. So, as I said earlier, we really hope this exhibition will be an opportunity for visitors to the Frist to, again, learn more about these remarkable artists working here in Nashville, but then also to gain a more complete picture of this neighborhood of North Nashville, both the rich history and vibrant current position, but also a more nuanced understanding of the persistent problems facing North Nashville and other communities of color here and around the country. So with that overview, I probably spoke longer than I should have. I'm delighted that we have 3 of the 4 primary members of the North Art Collective with us here, Woke 3, Dojo, and Sensei. And I'm hoping that maybe one of you or all 3 of you can maybe speak to what the North Art Collective is, how you all were founded, and you know, maybe a little bit about a current project. And if you guys want to use the 2, we've got 2 microphones there.
Okay, check it out. How y'all doing? I go by Woke 3, W-O-K-E, number 3. I have to thank Katie. Thank you again for this. The Frist, I have to thank y'all again. If we can get a round of applause real quick. So yeah, I'm from North Nashville. Been there all my life, and it's really good to see like this. I used to come to the Frist Museum when I was little. Used to go into the interactive gallery and paint. It was a local art teacher who kind of showed me a little bit about painting and took me around to different things and kind of introduced me to a lot of things. So it's really good to see this show about North Nashville, about my community in this space. So I love that. Thank you. But so the North Art Collective, I can give a little bit about it, and if y'all want to say a little bit. Started through the North Wall Fest. Actually, I met Sensei maybe a year before through an art show that we had did downtown. It was in the Tennessee Art League through a mutual friend. And then we met maybe months before the Wall Fest happened. And everybody else kind of I met through TSU and everything like that. So after the North Wall Fest formed and everything, we kind of figured like this is something that kind of has to keep going. This is something that after the walls were put up, like literally community members would come out, and if there's a story about a truck blocking one of the murals, and the lady would come out and say, you need to move that truck because we want to be able to see this wall. And it's like, it was that important. So we realized like this is something we have to keep doing. Ever since I was little, I always like just seeing kind of the bare blank walls. I came through doing graffiti, so I was always into like painting and kind of imagining what could be, in my neighborhood. So, learning about, how to kind of do grants and things like that, that kind of led to being able to create the North Wall Fest. And after that, we ended up getting together, -1, Keep 3, who isn't here, who actually even taught me about got me into doing graffiti. Like when I first met him, is what kind of pulled me into like realizing like I love art. Like I've been, like everybody has been drawing and stuff when they were little, but like I knew like this is what I'm gonna do. Like after meeting him and everything like that. So I'm gonna kind of pass it on to everybody else. So
I'm Dojo. Woke pretty much said everything that I would say about how we formed. It was just something that we knew we had to continue putting up in the neighborhood to tell our story and tell our piece of the story. And yep, I'll pass it on to Sensei, who I met painting his first mural at the North Wall Fest. So it's just been an amazing experience to be able to create with this team, knowing that we all were doing things in the community individually, but collectivizing and putting that energy into one thing has really shown to be something of benefit, and I think it's a great model for how community should work. So,
Sensei, it's gonna be kind of hard to follow that one up because I think you guys hit everything. But if I were to just add, just piggybacking off of what Dojo said, the idea of how art localized and things like that, how that can link you to other artists who are doing, or in the similar vein of just how they want the art to be presented in a responsible way, whether it's like something that is more, you know, centered around certain stories that you would like to tell. We all know about who gets to tell the story if you're the victor in the end, and this is one way to kind of like upend some of those narratives that are already out there, you know, staking a claim, and also, you know, providing some kind of springboard into like furthering the conversation to actual action and things like that. Definitely fortunate to work with these guys. Like they have definitely become more than family over the years, and even meeting Will, he kind of threw me on a wall, and I did not know how to do any of that. And then I'm my wall was right next to Dojo's, and we were like vibing and everything, and then it just kind of like coalesced into like this, something that I didn't even see. I mean, I didn't have no forethought on that, but I'm glad that now it has reached certain platforms and it has sparked certain relationships and conversations. So.
Great. Well, one thing I know that we're going to talk about in a little bit is how do we make some of these, by their nature, kind of ephemeral works permanent? And one way in which we can do that is through publications. And I'm very happy to say that we sent last night the files to Vanderbilt Press for a book that will be preserving both the works in our show, but also other projects that, again, are out in the community. And in addition to those images, Professor Dr. Loretha Williams, Jr. Wrote an essay kind of placing the works in the context of North Nashville. He is Associate Professor of African American and Public History at Tennessee State University, and he's also the manager of the North Nashville Heritage Project. And he is certainly, I think, acknowledged to be the expert on the history of North Nashville. And so we were really honored to have his contribution to our project. So now I'm wondering, Professor Williams, if you maybe want to speak a little bit more about your work.
Good afternoon. I'm Loretha Williams, Jr., Associate Professor of African American and Public History at Tennessee State University. I'm also the coordinator of the North Nashville Heritage Project. Thank you for that. I'm not a native of Nashville. I'm actually from Tallahassee, Florida. And I hear some of y'all groan out there. That's we cool. But my first real project that I was involved in here at TSU was the Gateway to Heritage Project. And I didn't know much about it. It was one of those things where I got a phone call from a department chair before I even had set foot on campus. He says, "Lee, how about helping us with this project?" And of course, I couldn't say no. So we were able to secure a tour of Jefferson Street. A gentleman by the name of Kwame Lillard gave us a walking tour of Jefferson Street. And be mindful of this, that in pursuit of my PhD, I studied the history of Nashville, in particular the civil rights movement. So I understood what went on down that street, but when I returned to class after the tour, the students asked me questions which I did not have an answer. They said, well, Dr. Williams, we know about the business districts, we know about the clubs, and we know about Diane Nash and the civil rights movement. And then they asked me, what about the folks that live on the streets that were adjacent to Jefferson Street? Don't they have a story? And I said, yes, and we will find out together. And that is how the North Nashville Heritage Project was born. We were trying to amplify, if you will, marginalized narratives, to tell stories that had been overlooked or had been stories that folks just felt as though it wasn't really important. So that's how we got involved with this. And initially it started as an effort to tell oral histories, stories that were important to the identity of the community. And then we grappled with, trying to figure out better ways of telling the story. As I could train my students in the historical method, right? I can teach them how to be historians, but we've been doing that for well over 100 years now. And they're still part of the narratives that are still unknown. So I said, okay, well, we have some poets out there. Let's see if some of our students can write some poems and get this story out. Every February during Black History Month, I'll go out by the James Weldon Johnson House and try to sing, lift every voice and sing to get my mind right for the month. But we have some amazing vocalists at TSU. And then I stumbled across these brilliant artists with the North Collective who figured out a way to tell these stories in ways that I could not. And very early on, I can't remember if it was Woke or Dojo who stepped to me. It might have even been Thaxton, I can't remember. But somebody asked me about people who had buildings around North Nashville that would allow them to paint murals. And I responded by saying, I don't know, I just got here, I don't know. But then lo and behold, I'm riding around, I'm going off of Buchanan or Buchanan, I can't, still not clear on how to pronounce that here. And I see the image of a woman whose hair is flowing along this building. I'm like, oh my goodness, somebody has painted an image of an African deity on that wall. So I pulled up to check it out, and I was like, man, this is like the most beautiful thing that I've seen. Then I went, and I can't remember, I don't even know what I was doing in this particular part of town, but I saw an image of W.E.B. Du Bois painted on the side of the building. And then the warehouses had some amazing images. And then when I looked at this magnificent display you got here, and I walked around and I looked and I said, this is like a cipher. Some of y'all might not be familiar with what that term is, but back in the day when I entertained these illusions of being a hip-hop artist, no, we'd get in a circle and we try to freestyle. And then for some of us who could really dance, and I said us, I'm not including me in this conversation, but we had some people that could really dance. They would stand in circles and dance, and it had a kind of flow to it. And this is what I see out here. And I remember telling Dojo this, and I said it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I didn't say it tongue-in-cheek. I really meant this. I was like, man, I'm not old enough to have been around when Aaron Douglas was in Nashville doing his thing. I go to the Hiram Art Gallery on campus, and I can take a look at the art that's presented in the building that bears his name. All right, I wasn't around for them, but I am around to see you guys do your thing. And I'm sincerely honored, and I consider it a privilege to be in Nashville at the time that y'all are getting down like you're getting down.
I agree, there's something really special happening. Thank you for that. And now I would like to introduce Wilna Taylor, who is the Assistant Director at the Curb Center for Art, Enterprise, and Public Policy. And could we ask you to speak for a few moments about your work and the mandate of the Curb Center?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you. So just to kind of ride the wave of what was just said, the Curb Center is established to help undergraduates and graduate students think about the role of arts, to cultivate an artistic sensibility, but then think of it beyond, you know, what the arts can offer, right? Especially when you're looking at community and what does that mean? So the idea of having an artistic sensibility, you know, being able to see art being produced and the effects that it has is the thing that we try to tap on, what's beyond, and that's when we get into policy, because the work is beautiful and it's inspiring, but then what else, right? And one of the conversations we had earlier before this panel is, once the work is up, but you don't have control of it, right? You don't have control of the space, you don't have control of telling your story, what do you do? So we challenge our students to think about how policy plays a role in that. Politics plays a role in that. And to challenge our leaders to be critical about the role of the arts and take it seriously, because we all appreciate it, but then giving it support, building policy that allows artists to thrive, to be able to continue the work is what we focus on. So being able to stop and see this beautiful piece of work that is no longer up, from what I understand, right? Because policy or politics and ownership played a role in it not being there anymore. So at the Curb, we think about this, and we encourage our students to have conversations about this stuff. And then also in their art practice, some of them are artists, some of them are creatives, how they can use the things that they have as students and as artists and as creatives to influence this type of conversation and to address some of these issues. That's it.
Great. So, Norf, guys, you touched on this a bit in your intro, but I'm just wondering how you see your murals really raising awareness of contemporary issues, and I assume that you want them to be an impetus for change. Can you maybe talk about some specific projects that you've worked on and what the real messaging behind those works was? We do have a few illustrations of your works if you want us to pull those up too. No, sorry.
Well, so and I can probably bring it up, but so well, the thing about public art is that, or murals, is if it's on a breeze, for example, it's so big. I mean, you'll have to see it. So that's one way that I know that, you know, if you have, you know, the spirit of the community put on a large surface like Family Matters, so you're going to see it. You can't go down Clarksville Pike coming from Bordeaux and not see a giant mural of John Lewis, Luby, or Curly Magruder, or Diane Nash. You can't go down that street without seeing that. So that's one way that I believe that public art is very important, because with that, whatever message, you know, a community is trying to say, or however the artist feels, you know, they put it out there, and you know, you're gonna see it. And it's not up, but there's a mural on Nolensville Road from Nashville to the world that we don't have an image of it, but you might want to talk about it a little bit.
That particular mural was done for the Workers' Dignity radio station. A lot of the work is centered on, migrant rights and housing rights, workers' rights, things like that. And they work with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers in Florida to provide oversight for farm workers. So in that particular instance, like, the role of art also, like, is, I guess it kind of goes without saying, but it's a connector. You'll find, like, these unified, ideas for, like, justice, and you'll find that there's these commonalities with communities that are doing, like, almost like the exact same work, or looking to do the exact same work, but may need an image or something like that to kind of reflect the ideas from those different types of initiatives. So, like, that particular building, it faces the actual center, and even with some of the other works that we've done with, like, the home invasion campaign, where we were sort of tackling, like, the thoughts, or certain thoughts around gentrification. I'm sorry, I'm really bad at public speaking. Give me a second. If I had some coffee, I'll be good. But yeah, it's just the idea of putting an image that can infer more, and it will actually, like, dig more into it. Sometimes people are like, oh, I like the mural with the big family on it. And it's like, okay, well, that's cool that they even drew that out of the image. And even if, you sit and marinate on it a little bit more, then you'll find, like, the other things that were in the mural that were intended. So I feel like I'm rambling, but yeah, that's.
Well, it sounds like audience is what's so particular about public art, because you have both, I mean, obviously there are some intentional viewers, but most people that see the work, it's completely unintentional, and they're just going about their day, and suddenly they're kind of knocked over the head with these typically large-scale pieces. And I wonder, I mean, that obviously has a big part to play in the role of the work.
Yeah, so I have a daughter, she's 3 years old, and one of the murals in the hallway forever, the girl with the yellow dress on, so she's, like, really tiny, and this mural is, like, really big to her. So when she sees it, the first thing she says is, oh, that's me right there. So she'll tell everybody that's her right there. And the castle, which is Jubilee, but to her it's a castle. So, something that big, scale really has an effect on people. It has an effect on me. I've been painting large scale for a long time, since I first picked up, a spray can. Since I've known about what acrylic was, it's always large scale. So I think it does have an effect when you see a giant, person on the wall.
And what about the role of history in your work? Professor Williams talked about, marginalized histories and stories, those of the people living off of Jefferson. You see a lot of references to history in your work, and I'm just wondering what you, how you mine history and how you reincorporate aspects of it into your works.
I'll talk a little bit about history because I've come to love it. I used to hate history in class. I wasn't a fan of Nashville in general, so I tried to run away at college. And then I came running back because I realized it wasn't that bad. But meaning there are far worse diverse places, and stories are even more suppressed. But coming back to Nashville in '08, I learned about Jimi Hendrix playing on Jefferson Street. And I grew up here, and I grew up listening to Hendrix, like in the 5th and 6th grade. And about that time, I was going to John Early. So it's like, how did I not know that right around the street this happened? And so I started volunteering for Jump, and which is Jefferson Street United Merchants Partnership. They played a part in the Gateway to Heritage Project. We came to know Michael McBride and James Thrillkill through various points of relation, but as soon as I realized like I wanted to pursue art, it was like I have to help tell these stories of this place because I know how empowered I felt knowing that that stuff happened here and like how important this place is, especially not appreciating it because it's always told from one side. So the history aspect is very intentional, and research and wanting to hear these stories from this oral tradition. People aren't documenting their stories because they're just living and working, but they're doing very powerful and important things. So we got the same story from Kwame when we were trying to figure out about Curly Magruder. You can't find much written about her because they weren't a fan. She was loud. She spoke up. And so he gave us that quote, and that's what we put up. Like, the world needed to hear that freedom is not a destination, it's a journey. We needed to hear that. We needed to know that that's what is important. So putting up those images and things like that, it's digging, it's really being inspired by people like Dr. Lee. Like, it's all of that, but knowing how important that really is, even though it's not so stated.
Yeah, could you speak just a little bit about what you've done at USN, just thinking of the history and with Fort Negley, and again, just kind of telling some of these hidden histories through your work?
Yeah, so I don't know a quick way to tell that story. So I'll just talk about, like, I guess the inspiration for that is we know that Music City is held up and all of these things, and the start of what that is. Like, Fort Negley being such it was a fort that was built because the Confederates didn't think enough to build forts in Nashville. And so there's a long history of what that means for the Union that forced these people into labor, even after they're freeing them from slavery, supposedly, all of these things, but they built Nashville. Like, these people helped to build this city, like learning about Robert Robertson, the person that came with James Robertson, who was an enslaved African American, like, who helped to plant these things, who helped to lay the roots for this city that we appreciate today. It's so, and I don't know, like, I don't know a quick way of saying that, but that's what got me into the door at USN, to be able to help people whose students, their parents are policymakers. The response from those parents when we unveiled the mural that's there, talking about the Edge Hill neighborhood, that was everything. Like, they need to hear that story just as much as we need to tell our story. So
it sounds, yeah. So really, it sounds like, I mean, a lot of this is looking towards history and kind of reframing it in a contemporary way to think about the present moment through the visual arts, and that can be a really powerful way of broadening everyone's awareness of these important histories that aren't always known, unfortunately. And Professor Williams, you spoke the other week in our planning meeting about the erasure of community and speaking to that, and how sometimes you see some of these murals as almost being like tombstone markers, and I think that took us all aback a little bit. Could you maybe expand on that and maybe explain how you see that?
I didn't know that comment was going to resonate like that. I'm sorry.
It really did, yeah.
The the mural that's at the Gateway to Heritage Project, have y'all seen that? The one that's up against the wall? You look at that and it depicts what the community used to be like. But it's not like that now. If it was an accurate reflection of what we see today, you see a whole bunch of tall and skinny buildings there. Buildings that, and bear in mind, my father builds homes, so I have appreciation for modern stuff, but they don't have any soul to them. So I was like, wow, these things are kind of like tombstones in that they show you what used to be there. The photographs become epitaphs, if you will, of what used to be. And we're mindful that they represent beautiful things, but they're things that are no longer there. And then as a historian, I start questioning. I'm like, why is this? Why aren't these buildings here anymore? Why aren't the people here anymore? Why don't I know this story already? And you start considering who makes the decisions on what we celebrate, what we erase. What groups are worthy of our considerations? And what groups are we not going to worry about too much? Then as a public historian, we start thinking along the lines where who can I talk to in order to get policy in place to protect what we see, stuff that has value, right? And I really don't know. And that's an answer to a lot of the questions I have. I really don't know. I'm friends with a lot of public officials, some I love and consider friends, and I can drop bugs in their ear, but I don't know if these little bugs that I'm dropping really have any effect on who makes those decisions. And another thing to consider, and I'll say this and I'll give up the mic, you know, it costs money to put your history out there in public. So it privileges the well-off in society. So the woman who may have fried chicken, if you will, for the Freedom Riders. You know, the Freedom Riders get arrested, they go to jail, and you have some little old lady maybe at Jefferson Street Baptist Church or my church, First Baptist, who's frying chicken for the students, but also says, hey, I better fry a few plates for the jailers and make sure our children get fed. Those stories aren't there. I wouldn't know them, and I studied this stuff in order to become Dr. Williams, right? Stories about the bookies on Jefferson Street or in North Nashville. Those underground economies, when you come to these folks and say, hey, I need a couple of $100 to get my kids out of jail. Who has that kind of money? They have that money, but we don't really know those stories. You can get whispers of them, right, in the barbershops, and I'm not sure what goes on in the beautician shops, but I'm sure y'all talk about interesting stuff too. But they're tearing all those down as well. So I don't know, I guess I said all that to say, not only should we think about what stories are getting marginalized, what stories are getting left behind, but we need to start to think in terms of policy. How can we protect these stories before we take them out to Greenwood Cemetery and put them in the ground?
Yeah, so you talked about how it takes money to tell history, and I think that that's very, that is very true and real. That's also shifting, of course, with social media, and I know that you are a very active social media person, and North, you all are as well. And I mean, I know you're out there. So I'm wondering if has that leveled the playing field in any way, because that obviously is free and a more democratic nature, perhaps? And I'm wondering, actually, if everybody could maybe speak about the role of social media. I hate to bring it up, but it's a relevant topic in this space.
I'll be quick. It sort of it allows voices that oftentimes wouldn't be heard to be heard. For my North Nashville Facebook page, I get a lot of suggestions on what I should look like, or I'll look at, or I'll post something, right? And then someone will say something to me that either clarifies what I'm looking at or gives me an idea to go down another avenue. And it's as a history professor, it's good to get out of the classroom and just to talk with ordinary people that are not caught up in the crazy world that is academia.
So it really creates connections. I mean, you get outside of your classroom and have a much broader reach, but it sounds like it's also collaborative. You throw out something that you don't know what it is, and you can get feedback from other people.
Yeah, what I would like to add to that, I think both are necessary to have a space that allows, like you said, level the playing field a bit. But I think there's something to be said about when traditional institutions allow these stories in. It sends a different message about what is valued when we talked about who gets to tell these stories. So it's one thing to see a story on Instagram or Facebook, but it's another instance when you have it at the Frist, right? It's another instance when you have it at, I don't know, whatever the major traditional institutions are. So yes, it's necessary, and you can't resist it because it's part of our time, but then there is a responsibility, I think, for the mainstream institutions or platforms to also think about why their stories are one-sided or why they're excluding stories. Yeah, so I think it's important to have both.
I agree. How about you guys? You want to speak to social media and how you see it kind of playing a role in your practice?
Well, I think, for me, social media is important because a lot of things that go on in the world that you may not know about, but you know about when somebody posts, or like things that might be happening overseas or anything like that, you kind of find out. Sometimes I find out through social media because, I don't trust a lot of kind of outlets anyway. And social media could be fake news. You never know. But it kind of gets me thinking when I see something, even if it is fake news, I start to think about that. And even before the Wall Fest, one of the inspirations was Murals in the Market, and that's in Detroit. And they've been doing those kind of festivals for a long time. Pow Wow, which is all over the world, they've been doing those kind of festivals for a long time. So that was inspiration for the Wall Fest too. And that's what got me to say, well, I can do those real large murals, like on the side of skyscrapers. Like you can see murals the size of the Batman building. Like those exist, And I didn't see, I would maybe hear about it, but it's nothing you would really, I didn't see it until I, scrolled down my timeline, and then it put me in a whole world of things. So, yeah.
You want to say anything else?
I'll just say that I'm terrible with social media, answering emails, text messages, but I think it is important because it helps to be an equalizer for what is oftentimes considered outsider. And people respond to things differently. You see it on social media, you can connect with things, and there's no one there, excuse me, there's no one there telling you this is what you're supposed to like. You like what you see, and I guess, algorithms curate what you see, but the people respond to it, then how can somebody else deny that? So.
Yeah, just like the less mediated aspects of it and the more direct connections, there is value there.
I'd like to add a little bit more in regards to being visible in a place that is, that has gravitas or value. Because when you talk about money playing a role in this and something being considered viable, while you're able to interact and not be censored and give your opinion on social media, I think when we start thinking about how can we get this work to the next level, then you have to kind of make your way. And it's one of the things I appreciate about the work that you're doing, because you're insisting yourself, right? You're making space for yourself, but then you have to get beyond, because once that space is then not yours and you're told to move, how do you continue to build, to insist on your story? And so, yes, let's get social media, let's get our stuff out there, but then let's also insist that our stories are told in places that the politicians will see, that the policymakers will see, and then they will also validate. So it's like when you think about Black history, when they have the shows that go up for that period, but they're not main stage, they're in the black box. That's a problem for me. It's great that they're getting a say, but why is it limited, right? So.
I'm seeing we're already, I will just say our show is not up during Black History Month, just. But I'm realizing we're already almost out of time, and there's so many other things I wanted to talk about. I definitely want to talk about who owns these works once they're made, and what kind of protections can be made, if any, or is that just the nature of public work? And specifically, we've had a lot of conversations about Woke's beautiful piece, Breeze, that was made in 2015 as part of the Wall Fest, that was just recently painted over. And I'm wondering if you can maybe talk from your side of things as an artist, and then maybe from the policy standpoint of what can be done to protect these, if anything.
So yeah, the Breeze mural is gone. It's been whitewashed. It's a blank wall now. And so with that situation, the guy that owns that property, it's just a storage building too. He just keeps, his boat and some of his tools and stuff in there. But it was a fight to kind of get him to even accept that mural, because his first thing he said was the community might not like it, and he's been in that community for a while, but hasn't been living in that community. So I don't know how he knows what the community was gonna think anyway, but eventually he accepted it, and it was up. But then now he's saying that the whole thing is that it's more beautiful if we just keep it blank. So he went over it, and he says that's the new look, is the blank wall, I guess. So he's done with the community thing, and it's just, when that happens, it's just like he's done with the community. That's what he said. I'm done with the community thing. That's a quote. And when somebody that owns, because these property owners, they own the building, so they want to knock it down. If they want to paint over it, it's kind of they own it. But the thing is, though, with the beauty of a building or the beauty of a space, that belongs to the whole community. So the community does have interest in it. If something is so significant to that community, the community can fight that, and which is something I've been kind of researching myself. But you can fight that if it's really significant to that community. But a lot of the times that doesn't even matter. There's a story about Graffiti Mecca in New York, Long Island. And this space was up for 12 years, full of graffiti artists from all over the world. People from all over the world would come. They even had their own curators. It was an abandoned warehouse. And then, the owner, he sold it. The new owner came in, and before he knocked it down, because the graffiti artists that were fighting, they went to court and everything. Before he knocked it down, he whitewashed the whole wall, and then he left it up there for a few months, and then he knocked it down, just to kind of prove a point. And that's just, and they fought for that, but nothing happened.
They got 6.7 million.
Yeah, but then they got some money for it, but it's still set for an appeal. They've been waiting for a long time for that. and so they're just kind of holding that off, so they haven't got paid anything. So that, but there are stores where people kind of win, and it's just, I'm still trying to figure that out, because, the community, beauty, it belongs to the community, but the property, it's theirs, so I'm trying to figure that whole part out. You can create contracts between the property owner and things like that, but, this, particular thing wasn't done, so.
Well, now, are there any policies that can help preserve these works, or on a broader level, I guess, are there any cities that you think serve as good models for being able to protect public art, or even just to fund public art? That's something we haven't really had a chance to talk about yet either, but obviously, again, this work kind of falls outside of the traditional gallery commercial space, and so how do you fund public art? You guys, I mean, they're expensive to make because there's a lot of material, a lot of paint that goes into them, and it takes a long time. So I'm just wondering if there are models that you think are good ones that maybe we could emulate here in Nashville.
So I think there might be several, but every place is different. I know Philadelphia pops into mind because they have a very robust mural project. But it goes back to just educating yourself as to what the laws and the mandates are where you are. Like you were speaking, Woke, about what happened in New York. That may not be the same circumstances here based on what the terms and the laws are here, right? And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak on that. And also what you said, Dr. Williams, is that sometimes even speaking to the right people may not necessarily guarantee that you will get the outcome that you want, but the things that you have to try, right? Because again, the person owns the property, they have the right to do whatever they want with it. Perhaps getting into a contract with them, perhaps working as a collective like our artists here are doing, and working with art entities like Metro Arts, et cetera, to kind of get a strong presence to influence some type of policy, to present something to your representatives that may help with coming to some kind of term or agreement. But again, it seems like it's very broad, and it varies based on where you are. So educating yourself on the policies, but then also looking at like places like Philadelphia. How do they, because again, they have a very robust art scene and creative placemaking, and so what are they doing? And even if their policies are not the same as here, but maybe we can emulate them somehow or put that into the conversation.
Well, and it seems like Nashville, given the recent election and the new mayor, I mean, it seems like we're at a crossroads, and a lot of people voted their dissatisfaction with the status quo, so I think this could be an important moment for us moving forward.
I was just going to say, so another thing is we just can't give these kind of pieces to people who don't really care at all, because my grandma was the one that told me the mural was getting gone over. I didn't even know. He didn't contact me or anything. She just, I don't know if you kind of stopped by there and talked to him or something, but he told her, and then she just called me. But if they wouldn't have talked, he would have just done it. So, we just can't, give these pieces to people,
Yeah, that's, and that's unfortunately not the first time that ownership has come up as an issue with our work. With our interests, we try to literally give something to our community. We don't necessarily try to get all the money from the business owner, because we know that we want to help them improve the aesthetic of their business. Sometimes because we care about the neighborhood, we know they do, but they may not be able to afford it, so we try to seek funds elsewhere. But other times there are people who are not invested in the community, and we can make their place cool and then be pushed out of any business opportunity there, or any residuals or things like that. And that's happened several times. That's happened that's what the artists do. They make things cool for things to ultimately happen. And this is a topic that is definitely something that we talk about and discuss a lot because we own our ideas, but they have certain control over what happens to us even with some of those places and things where we put that energy into.
And there's also that added risk of, like, if you do give your artwork to a certain entity, they don't have the investment in the community or anything like that. It's almost as if it's like the stamp that they were looking for to get, you know, the buy-in or whatever. And so, like, the ideas of the ownership, even like with some of the images that are reproduced and stuff like that, those are like very interesting, like little hurdles that have to be, you know, leaped, and not all the time. From an artist standpoint, we have like the legal jargon or like the, you know, the savvy way of navigating all that space. So like, to your point, like reaching out or you know, utilizing those institutions that do like advocate for that you know are about what they say. If it is for the people, like obviously, you know, when you put artwork out there, you know, on a technical level, like it's you know, you've released it like that. Now it's everyone's. But then, but just making sure like some of those other like protections are out there. The intentions are from a place of good intent rather than like, you know, this kind of carnivorous like aspect of what business can be.
Well, one kind of upside of making the works for our show that are obviously seen in an indoor space rather than an outdoor space is, well, A, you all own them, and so but we've also talked about, and actually several people have been asking our guards and our frontline staff, what's going to happen to these murals when the show closes? And because they're huge and no artist has a studio space big enough for them, we are working on placing these murals in schools, in community centers, and various places in North Nashville, where they will be on view for, you know, on long-term loans. So hopefully they can be preserved physically, you know, these particular works. So I'm realizing that we're already after 1. Gail, do we have a moment just to ask one question? And Alicia, do you have your hand up? Or okay, would you like to add to any of what was said? Yes.
So I'm loud, so I don't need a microphone. I'm Alicia Murals. How y'all doing? I'm not going to be long. I just have to say, with the whole thing about ownership and artwork, that art and public spaces and the art on these walls would be better preserved if artists were able to own buildings and own property in our neighborhoods instead of being forced to be at the mercy of the people coming in. And if you support artists and you pay them what they're worth, then they will be able to purchase these buildings and hold on to these areas in order to continue to provide creative capital to the neighborhoods. Art is a skilled labor, like an electrician, like a plumber, and should be paid fairly, and that's just something I was going to put out there.
Well said. Yeah, we can take a quick question.
Hi, I'm not from Nashville. You can tell that as soon as I open my mouth. But for the ordinary person, those of us wannabe woke white folks who are not policymakers and are not millionaires, how can we help you get this story? I'm thinking particularly, you know, Doja and Dr. Williams said about how do we help you get these stories out? How do we support you in what you guys are doing, which is incredible?
I'll say quick plug. the Jefferson Street Art Crawl is an event that we host in partnership with artists and business owners like Alicia. And that's just as far as like the supporting the arts part. But in that, you get to kind of, as a secondary thing, help with the storytelling. It is very much our responsibility to be able to tell our story, and it is other people's responsibility to allow that story to be told. We have our institutions, and sometimes we don't own those institutions, and we try to use those spaces to tell our story. And as much as we appreciate the opportunity here, the Frist is definitely, this is huge for us, but Fisk University has a collecting gallery, and we're also a part of a show that's there. And it's going to those institutions and supporting those institutions as they stand. And there's a larger conversation about the value of things and how they're not valuable when we possess them, but in the hands of other people, they can figure out how to make that money. So I think it really is in supporting what is, just as well as trying to figure out ways and being creative. I don't take on the struggle of trying to help people all the time, telling them, hey, this is how you can help us. Like, that's overwhelming. I try to do it from another point, I guess.
I would also just add, on a basic level, pay attention to what's happening in your community and vote. I'm realizing more and more how I vote in a national arena doesn't matter, but what I do here does. And even though we have some voting fatigue going on after the last year or so, like, it's still important to vote in every election, in my mind. Okay. All right, one more question?
One more.
Yep.
So this is excellent. I just happened upon this and needed to get out of my office, and I'm so thrilled that I came today. I'm sitting here wondering, and I'm glad the financial stuff came up, because I'm just wondering, like, are y'all straight? That's the question that I have. You know, are you, Nashville is crazy, nobody can afford to live here, you guys are doing wonderful things, and I'm just overwhelmed with concern about, you know, are y'all straight? Are y'all getting taken care of, right? So I'm not trying to be in your business, but it's just at the top of my mind. So
that's a real question.
So but the other question is, so I have a friend who just did something really cool in the city. It was like a tour of the murals or something of Nashville. So clearly people are monetizing this. I don't think that they were y'all's murals, but I mean, I'm wondering if you're thinking about ways to, you know, help us access this, help us know the stories behind the pieces. Like, I have driven my kids around just to look at some of the art, but hearing some of the stories behind the art, if it was an app or, you know, something, I think would be so impactful for me, like a real live Nashvilleian, born and raised here, you know, all my life kind of thing. So I just send you guys blessings. I don't have any money, but if I had some, I swear I'd give you everything I had.
I'll jump in for real quick, and then I'll pass it because I know they have insights too. But we are working to get straight. Like, that's kind of a thing. Like, I try to be very adamant about getting artists paid. Like, when we have art shows, I don't capitalize. I can't take a commission off of another artist, especially as a working artist. So I think it's odd that there's there are gatekeepers who not only gatekeep, but they make profit off of. And there's only a certain month where we get the opportunity to show in their gallery. So, but we have this constant fight of trying to even remind people that we know how much you paid to get your building painted and colored one color of paint. And then you come with a budget that's much less than that for a visual artist. And we know what we're bringing is unique. So it's really, it's so complex, but we are working to try to get there. We are not there, if I'm being honest and just quick. So we always need support. Like, people definitely have this illusion that, oh yeah, y'all doing this big thing, y'all got the money, and it's like, that's what we're trying to get too. Like, that's why we're doing it on this level. I mean, it can't be denied at the same time. And it's, say what? No, we're not set up, and that's, there are a lot of different things and hassles like that we face. Like, we are literally, this is 3 years running, and we just ran with a big dream, and it's trying to navigate all these things. And also just, there's a lot to it. Like,
Well, I heard-
life is
Well,
real.
what Woke said is that when you all were looking into getting a 501c3, the lawyer wouldn't do it until you guys had contracts with each other, and you were like, "That's not how we roll. That's just not. That's out of the spirit of it." So it's complicated, right?
Yeah, they want an established hierarchy. Like, people don't understand like this idea of co-opting and sharing and what it means to have like a community-based thing and what that really looks like. And they want us to have like this structure that we don't agree with. And then also being in that space, we couldn't necessarily tell the stories that we tell, I feel like. I think there will be another layer there that would start to really inhibit our work and what we're trying to do with it, so.
All right, well, on that note, thank you all very much for coming today. Thank you to our panelists for coming out in the middle of this hot day in October, nonetheless. And I do hope that you will come and see this exhibition many times. It is free throughout the run of the project through early January. And I guess I also want to point out a show that we just opened on Friday, and that's the exhibition devoted to Native women artists. And I think that a lot of the things, you know, that we're talking about that relate to this community resonate with others too, and that intersectionality between, you know, marginalized communities, whether they be African American or Native American, that there's a lot of common ground there and a lot of educating for many of us that can happen in multiple arenas. So again, thank you for coming, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.